Hi, this is Melanie of Pardesi Reviews. Today I have two special guests, Harsha and Katherine of the Polandine Patti podcast. And we're going to talk about the best films of Malayalam Cinema in 2022. Now, we talked for such a long time and had such a great discussion that I'm breaking this up into three parts. So this first part, we talk about how Katherine and Harsha started their podcast, their journey of watching Malayalam films, and we start our discussion of their best films in Malayalam cinema of the year. So we start in the first part with Archana 31 Not Out and a discussion of 191A. There will be two more parts to this discussion, two separate videos coming soon. Hi, this is Melanie of Pardesi Reviews, and I'm here with two special guests, Harsha and Katherine of the Polandine Patti podcast on Malayalam Cinema. We're going to talk today about how their podcast started, how they started watching Malayalam films, especially in Katherine's case, and we're going to highlight some of the best films in Malayalam cinema of 2022. We're not going to give our top 5 list, but we're going to talk about some films that were special to Harsha and Katherine. And if you enjoyed those films, Katherine and Harsha will have tips on other films to watch next. Okay, so I want to start. Welcome, Harsha and Katherine. This is our second try. I flubbed in the beginning. So anyway, Katherine, you told me that you had started watching films, Malayalam films, about 12 years ago. How did you come to start watching Malayalam cinema?
Shah Rukh Khan, simple answer.
Wow.
Absolutely. He was in, and I thought 12 years, but it's a little earlier than that because 2008 he was doing promos for Bilu. And as part of those promos, he said he was giving a screenwriting credit to Srinivasan, who wrote the original film. And I had no clue, but I was intrigued because I kind of like remakes and I kind of like looking at remakes and seeing how they get remade. So decided to go searching for this film. Now you can imagine 2008-9 at this point.
Yeah.
It was very challenging to find films. My partner Rob started phoning, Malayalam groceries to see who was, had films available. Found one grocery in the east end of Toronto that was bringing in actual legitimate DVDs. He asked if they had it. They did. It had subtitles, and we went to buy it. And for a long time, that's actually how I got access to films. We would take a trip to Toronto, and I would go and raid their DVD shelf. So
the kids today do not realize what we went through back in the day.
So it was a film called Kadapparayam Pol. If you see Bilu, it's a very faithful remake of that film. And I know Bilu didn't do really well, but one of the things that really struck me about it was how faithful a remake it was. It was a very rooted film, just like, Harsha and I talk about this a lot, how rooted Malayalam films are.
Yes.
And I mean, literally that was it. And I started, from that, I would, again, I said, raid their DVD shelves. I would choose this, I would choose that. I would start researching. Like I had no clue who anyone was at this point. And it's almost embarrassing how clueless I was.
Well, I mean, I've talked about how clueless I was when I started watching Malayalam films. It was because I watched OK Kanmani, which is a Tamil film starring Dulquer. And I'm like, who is this guy? And I went to look for more of his films and ordered the DVDs for Ustad Hotel and Bangalore Days. Because again, the amount of Malayalam films that we can get on streaming now, it's just like it didn't exist, just a few years ago. It wasn't that long ago, but that started my journey, and I thank Dulquer every day because they bring such joy to me. They're so different than other Indian cinema. Not that I don't like Telugu and Tamil and Hindi cinema. I'm just saying there's something special about Malayalam cinema. And so thank you, Dulquer. Yeah, I get that. You just kind of have that path of you finding one movie and then it takes you on this amazing journey. Harsha, go ahead. Sorry, I'm sorry.
I actually wanted to mention, like, Harsha has talked a number of times on our podcast about how she's come back to Malayalam cinema as a way to kind of reconnect with her own culture. So maybe she can speak to that.
Yeah, Harsha, can you talk about that a little bit? Did you grow up watching all the classic Malayalam films, or is it more recently that you've gone back to check them out?
Yeah, I am a Malayali, so I grew up with all these classics. But around the 2000, 2002 era, we moved to the States, and so we were living in the Gulf, so we had a lot more access to Malayalam movies there. And, it was just, as we discussed, the Chicagoland area, you have to go to Des Plaines to see Malayalam movies there in theater there. That might not be the case now. And the movies actually were of a lower quality than maybe what I had grown up with in the 90s and that people were watching in the 80s. That's the Malayalam Golden Age.
Right.
And so, we had these aging superstars in Mohanlal and Mammootty, and Prithviraj was very much still in his, he was still in that phase of establishing himself as a superstar. And then the other person who was dominating the industry, we don't talk about on our podcast. So
yes.
so
he who must not be named.
Yeah, we don't talk about Bruno, and Bruno was dominating the industry at that time, and he made some good movies that I have fond memories of, but overall, I think the quality went down. There was a lot more misogyny. Not that previously Malayalam cinema wasn't misogynistic. It's a patriarchal culture, like all over the world. The industry is dominated by men. But I think the lowest common denominator became much lower during that era, and the wigs became somehow worse.
The wigs are the bane of our existence.
And so, as a teenager, actually, when I was a kid, my parents didn't really let us watch Hindi films because the kind of Hindi films that my sibling and I liked were Govinda and Akshay Kumar movies. So they were just kind of, all the Khiladi movies, David Dhawan movies. They're not particular intellectual movies, and my parents just found them degenerate in some way. And to be fair, my parents are people who took me at 8 years old to watch Vanaprastham, and I fell asleep in the movie theater. So for people who don't know, it's a very highbrow movie about Kathakali and not appropriate for an 8-year-old. So my parents only let us watch English language movies and then Malayalam, and so and because of where we're from in Kerala, we had a lot of Tamil influence as well, and a lot of Malayalis watch Tamil movies. So our diet was primarily non-Hindi, and then in the 2000s, I felt like Hindi cinema was going through a bit of a transition with some movies like Omkara, and there was definitely a attempt to start something a little bit more intellectually dense in Hindi cinema at that time, at the mainstream level, and so I was really watching a lot of Hindi films and getting into Hindi films. I was following a lot of these, and I like hearing what people think about films in a deeper way than do I just like it or not. Obviously, that's why we do this now.
Yeah.
And so I started reading a lot of these film bloggers, a lot of them non-Indians, like Katherine, and that's through that blog chain is how I found her. And she was one of the few people who was just solely focused on Malayalam cinema. And I was like, oh, wow, this woman is, at that time I was, around the 2009, 2010 era, Malayalam, like movies like Nayagan came out, City of God, So these were Lijo Joyce Pelisheri movies, Traffic. So these were finally movies that were like, oh wow, like, you know, Malayalam cinema is trying to do some of the stuff that the experimental stuff, the interesting things they could have done in the past without all the misogyny and lowest common denominator elements. And Katherine was one of the few peoples I felt was, you know, linking that that period, the 2009 onwards period, to maybe the golden age of cinema. And I just found reading her stuff really helped me understand Malayalam cinema better. And so I had been following her for a decade before I reached out to her on Twitter, because she was talking about, you know, doing a podcast. And I was, it was the pandemic. And I was thinking about doing a podcast, and I had kind of reached out to some people online, and they were younger than me, and so they were very much not sure about how much time they could devote to it, and you know, they didn't know if they had the resources. So I was like, you know, Katherine wanted to do. I saw that she wanted to do it. And I was like so excited, because this is somebody who I had like been reading for so long, and here we are. It's been a really nice journey.
So,
Yeah,
Katherine, you should mention the name of your blog, by the way.
It's totally filmy, and it comes from a somewhat not great Hindi film called Mumbai Matinee. And at one point, there's like a very cheesy director in it. He's always coming up with, you know, scenarios and things. And at one point, a character says to him, "Oh, you are so totally filmy." And I went, "Yeah, okay, let's go with it."
I started reading your blog, and I went, "Oh, I wish I could be Katherine's friend." And
this is so flattering. This is like with the two of you, like it's so flattering.
No, but really, you were this voice that was writing and illuminating the films to me, giving me context as a beginner of watching Malayalam films. It was invaluable to me. Again, we got met through Twitter. And the funny thing is, we do a podcast on Korean dramas, because Katherine also has a depth of knowledge on Korean dramas that you guys wouldn't believe. But today we're talking Malayalam cinema. Tell me about the name for the podcast. How did you choose that name?
Harsha came up with it. When she contacted me, one of the reasons I kept not doing a podcast is I actually didn't want to be a sole voice on it. I didn't think I could bring enough to the table as one person sitting there talking. And when she approached me and said, "How do you feel about this? What do you think?" I was like, "Oh, this is like perfect." Because we've got the two of us who have sort of a similar joining point, Harsha getting back in and me starting to watch.
Right.
But I had no idea about the name. And she said, "What about Polandine Patti?" And I just went, okay, that is brilliant. And now Harsha will tell you why it's so brilliant.
Harsha, go ahead. You were just explaining to me before we joined.
So this was definitely a shower thought. I was like really racking my brain, thinking about, what would we call the podcast? Polandine Patti is a dialogue from the film Sandesham, which is also written by Srinivasan, and from that golden age of Malayalam cinema. And it's a line that Malayalis will know. It's a very frequently quoted line, and it basically refers to the film is about two brothers who are so very concerned about politics and greater global affairs. We're talking about still the Cold War era, that but they have no idea what's going on in their own house and like kind of the struggles of their own family. And so Polandine Patti is something is basically means like don't talk is about, it literally means about Poland, and the line is don't talk about Poland. And that's because one of the brothers is so upset because his other brother is like trying to argue about politics by bringing up the example of Poland. And so we're talking about some of the things that we feel are missing out in the Malayalam film discourse. Yeah. And it's a little bit different now because a lot of people are talking about Malayalam films. You know, Film Companion is talking about Malayalam films.
Right,
As I
right.
jokingly tweeted maybe last year, it's so funny that Anupama Chopra just discovered Malayalam films in 2018. And so it's I don't see a lot of female perspectives on Malayalam cinema.
Yeah, that's true.
And that I think that's not the only thing we bring to it, but I think it's an important thing we bring to our podcast.
Right.
We have a very anti-film bro narrative going on in our podcast.
Yeah.
But we're very open about that, and simply because we do see ourselves as kind of a way to counter that vision, and also, you know, like Harsha mentioned, suddenly since 2018, a lot of people discovering Malayalam cinema, and they're going to get a somewhat skewed perspective. Particularly, let's bring it up, Mohanlal.
Yeah.
Because one of the, you know, sort of notes I threw in while prepping for today was who is having a good year, who is not, and Mohanlal is not having a good year, and Mohanlal has not had a very good stretch. And I have actually had people say to me, I don't get it. Why does everyone love him? And I have to say, okay, you have to go back and look at the legacy films. You have to go back to the 90s.
Right.
And you have to see how natural this man is. And like, it's stunning, the differences. So some of that is what we're trying to do too, is to make people just a little more aware of legacies in Malayalam cinema, of particular films that maybe get a little overlooked.
Right.
And again, like Harsha's idea was to build things around themes, and that just clicks for us.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I have watched some classic films, and my viewers were great in recommending. And I do also, like, if I have to choose between Mohanlal and Mammootty, because it's sort of like, which of the Khans, you know, is your favorite, whatever. I mean, I tend towards Mohanlal but it's those classic performances. Devasuram is my personal favorite of his classic films. But I've watched, I mean, there's just it's an overwhelming library of films of a career that both Mammootty and Mohanlal have done. And you guys do such a great job of highlighting some of these classic films and talk about modern films that are sort of having a conversation with these classic films, right? Be it retelling a story that's kind of familiar in a new way, or just having, like we were just talking about Pre and On the Run, how Mammootty is just kind of this overwhelming presence of the entire film, and I was wondering, is he going to do a little cameo? And he does, but just the whole theme of the movie shows how huge of a presence he is in Malayalam cinema. I laugh at myself because when I started watching Dolker, I had no idea he was a star kid. Like, it's so obvious now, but I had no idea. But I mean, that's the thing. There, different people now have an entry point into Malayalam cinema because of streaming. You know, whether it could be Tovino Thomas's latest superhero film that came out last Christmas, that a lot of people, that was their first Malayalam film, and they're like, oh, what's this? What else is there? And it's like, you know, they have no idea of just this, the history. And some of those classic films are available on streaming, but so many of them are harder to find. All right. So Katherine, why did you decide that 2022 was going to be the year that you watched? What did you say? It's up to over 80 films that you've watched?
It's in that neighborhood right now.
Oh my God.
Truthfully, well, I'm obsessed, but they're available.
Yeah.
We touched on this earlier about how when I first started getting into this, I would, like, driving to Toronto and scrambling around. I finally found places online to order DVDs, and then all of a sudden, all the DVDs like disappeared.
Yeah. Yeah.
But now suddenly we have so much available on streaming.
Yes.
Like, I was going through, like, I was looking at a Wikipedia list of films for this year, and there are about 240 films listed for Malayalam cinema alone.
Wow.
Now, a good 140-ish we are never going to see, because either they were very small films, a very niche audience, festival films, which are harder to get released.
Right.
But probably at this point, about 100 films that were either in theater, are now on streaming or are just about to come to streaming, and that's a substantial number of films. And there's a lot in there that's like, there are some that I watched and went, okay, fine, done. But like, trying to narrow down what to talk about today was really hard. But
Yeah,
simply,
it
that's the
was.
simple answer. So much is available right now. We are so lucky.
I feel like there was this among artists, the pandemic restricted so many films. Some films got shelved, but then that led to new creative partnerships. I don't know. I mean, Bheeshma Parvam, for instance, I think was a film. The filmmakers originally were going to do a different film with Mammootty, and that got sidelined because of COVID. And so then we got this amazing film instead. So I do think there was sort of this pent up, more things came out this year because finally people could get together and film and do projects. Or when they were in isolation, they had these creative bursts because they couldn't film. So writers had all these scripts ready. I don't know, but it's amazing that you set out to watch, but you're right, but they're on all different streaming services that we all live in the US. And it is a frustration for me is that there's not just one home for it. If someone says, recommend a film to me, I have to literally look, call up my friend Kathy Gibson has a website where I access Bollywood.net, where she keeps track of what Indian films by language are on the three major services here are Netflix, of course, Amazon Prime, and Hulu, which I think has most of the things that are in India on Hotstar. But then there's all sorts of smaller niche streaming services, some that are just available in India. And it's frustrating because some favorite film could come out, but it's on this. It's like, oh, do I have to sign up for another one just to watch this particular film? But so kudos to you for seeking all of these out.
Well, and they move around too, because
Yeah,
one of the films I got to this year was a film called Antakshari, and it was on Sony Live. And I have a list and I write down where everything is. So I finally got to this film, went to Sony Live, and suddenly it was not there. Like in the course of a few weeks, it disappeared off Sony Live, and then it ended up on Simply South. So I was sort of grateful for Simply South. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we have Hotstar in Canada as well, so I don't have to do the Hulu Disney thing. But you've got like Sony Live, Hotstar, Eros Now.
Right. You hold on. Simply South seems to be getting, and they have good subtitles. So that's been a bit. Sometimes we have to go to semi-legal places to see some of these things because they're just not available for us in the U.S. as readily as they might be in Kerala. So, all right, let's get into it. Now, Harsha, I don't know exactly which films that you wanted to highlight, so go ahead and tell me your first one that you would like to say is one of the better films that you saw in 2022.
I think my first one is going to be Archana 31 Not Out, which is a very low-key film. It's kind of what Malayalam cinema does well. It's a village set film. It's about a woman who is going through this process of trying to find a husband through the arranged marriage process, and on top of that, she also has the responsibility of taking care of her parents, who her father is not well, and her mother is a housewife, so she's bearing all the financial responsibility for the family. And I think what drew me into this film was that it was nice to see Aishwarya Lakshmi, who has only been in the industry for a few years. She's actually a doctor, but it seems like she's really kind of blowing up in the last year with her role in Ponniyin Selvan. But her first film, Maya Nadi, was a hit, and I think a lot of people really enjoyed her performance in it. But she tends to play these urban type of roles, so it was interesting to see her in a rural role. And when I started watching it, I was so very charmed by the title credits for one thing. So it just drew me in at the beginning. And her portrayal of this character is somebody who just she's almost a shock absorber for her family and the people around her. She just anything that happens, she just kind of absorbs, and she's like, I'll find a solution. And I think it's you sometimes find very no nonsense women like that playing supporting characters in films. And it's interesting to see a character like that who's not very weepy, who's not super emotional about everything, and just kind of doing her thing and accepting that all the stuff that life throws at her as a main character. The film is populated by theater actors, and they're all Malayalam cinema has these gadfly roles very frequently, and these characters just kind of weave in and out, causing chaos as she's preparing for this wedding. And she's like, I just got to get through this. And as somebody who's planned a big event recently, I found it so relatable on that level. It's just, as the bride, the responsibility is on you to really just make sure that things go to plan, because there's just a lot riding on it. And then when things kind of go topsy-turvy in terms of her wedding, she refuses to share what's happened with anybody else, and she's like, I'm gonna find a solution to this. It doesn't matter if there is no groom at this wedding. I'm gonna find a solution. And at the end of the film, you kind of expect her to end up marrying somebody else. Is it spoilers allowed? Are we doing spoilers?
Go ahead. All right, spoiler alert.
So and part of you roots for her to find somebody else who she can marry at the end, but she just kind of marries herself at the end. And there's a millennial meme that getting married is basically unachievable for a lot of us, especially in the States, because of loans and things like that. So there's a lot of jokes about people throwing weddings for a new job or buying a house or something like that. And so she just decides to make her wedding about a celebration of herself and the joy that she feels having her family and her community around her. And she still has a potential love interest at the end. But she's not feeling any pressure to get married right away. And I just found the message of autonomy, but not having it sort of hit you over the head with it, very refreshing. And Aishwarya Lakshmi did a great job. I think she really did a great job. And I like her stoicism was she carried that character stoicism so well. And if you like this film for sort of the female-centric point of view, I recommend Ohm Shanthi Oshaana from 2014. If you,
one of my favorites.
It's one of my favorites too.
Oh,
if you like it for sort of the gadfly characters causing chaos, I recommend Kunjiramayanam, which is Basil Joseph's first film. And there's a lot of drinking and chaos making in that film as well, set in a village. And actually, one of the other films I'm going to talk about is also something I recommend if you liked Archana 31, which is Member Nation Ombadam Ward or Ninth Ward. So that's going to be the next film I recommend.
Okay.
Also a village set film. Actually, do you want to? Should we switch to Katherine?
Yeah. Well, whatever. Katherine, do you want to go first? We'll go next, and then we'll come back to Harsha.
Let me add in as another film to follow on that, Kumari, which has just arrived on Netflix. I haven't seen the whole thing. I was actually this morning trying to get a sense of it. I think Harsha and I will talk about this film at some point. but again, very supernatural folktale kind of setting. And so far, again, she's doing a great job.
Great. All right, Katherine, what's your first film that you would like to talk about that you really enjoyed in 2022? Can you narrow it down?
Yeah, I know. Actually, let me go to 191A, because we were talking, Melanie watched this film and very much did not like it for reasons.
Okay. I haven't posted my review of it yet. I would say it's a film that I admired, but I was frustrated watching it. And I think part of that is because I am an outsider. And I think there were a lot of things unspoken in the film, or that they just assumed the audience would know, and kind of left to either was just inferred or implied. And so I felt like some of the things in the film were going over my head, and other things, it's just a very interior kind of a movie. I mean, but I admire it very much. The message of the film about freedom of speech. I admire Vijay Sethupathi and Nithya Menon being in a film like this. I admire any kind of film that's about a young woman's transformation, of her coming to, a new understanding of life and going in a new direction. I mean, all of that is to admire. It just didn't work for me all the time. But anyway, Katherine, why don't you tell everyone why you loved it so much?
And I actually loved it for all the reasons I think that you couldn't connect with the film. It's the first film from Indu VS. And I was reading some interviews with her about this, and she was talking about how she's very much an introvert. And what she wanted to do in her first film was create an introverted film about an introverted woman. And I think that as an introvert, that really spoke to me. So you have this nameless woman. She's only listed as Penkuti, which means like girl or young woman. Harsha can help in the credits.
Yeah.
So she becomes kind of an every woman in that way. Yeah. But she's got this very, very narrowly conscribed life. She runs her family photocopy shop. And her day is, she gets up, she makes breakfast, she takes her scooter, goes to the copy shop, she works there, she comes home, and that's her day. Right. And she has like no drive, no ambition. At one point she says, when somebody asks a question about it, she's like, up until now, I've only ever done what people expect of me. So this whole film is about her being, learning how to live in a way that is doing things that are not what everyone expects of her. Right. And the way that happens is one day, this writer, Gauri, turns up at her shop, played by Vijay Sethupathi, with a manuscript that he wants copied. And he says to her, I might be late, but I will be back. And he never comes back. Because as we've discovered it's not a spoiler in the opening frames of the film, he is assassinated. And she has no idea who he is. She starts to learn by seeing it on the news. And then the whole film is about her journey to kind of discover who he is. What should she do with the manuscript? Right. So she meets at various points all of these characters who he's been associated with, and she learns about his activism and she has examples about activism. She has a friend who very early in the film is all about tree preservation and is being interviewed. And I actually love that scene because she's watching him being interviewed, and he's talking about the trees, and they're shooting under this tree that's right in front of her coffee shop, and her gaze goes up and the camera pans up, and it's like she's seeing these trees for the first time ever.
Right. The meaning of it, the deeper meaning of so many things. Yeah. But
so I think if you're not prepared to, or if it's not to your taste to have a film that's this very purposefully introverted and introspective, it may not be a film that you can hang onto emotionally. Yeah. But I did admire the fact that in Duvias, this is exactly what she wanted to make as a film. She knew what she wanted to make. And she did actually say in the same interview that, I know you can't make all the films that sort of in the same style that kind of are in your comfort zone, but for this is what I wanted to do. So I'm curious to see what she will do next.
Right.
But that's why, and the other thing I liked about the film is, and we've seen that with other films this year, that very often films about activists and activism are very tension driven and
Yes,
sort of hyper emotion. And this is a film that's very much about, because the title refers to the section in the Indian Constitution about freedom of speech, that individuals have the right to freedom of speech and expression. So it's a very political film,
right?
That's
but in a different way than most of the ones that we're used to. You're right. It's not that we don't see things happen to Vijay Sethupath's character, of people, responding to his work and his activism. It's just not it's not set in a thriller. I was thinking if Hollywood was making a movie about a free speech something, it would either be set in a courtroom drama, or it would be a thriller of somebody kind of on the run, and still speaking out, even though things are happening to them. But we would have a movie where we would feel like they were, being chased or whatever. And this film wasn't doing that. But some of my frustrations were, I love that it was focused on her character, but we see her read, for instance, we see her reading the manuscript, and so we don't find out until the very, very end of the film even what the book is about. Okay, that was a choice, but I'm just saying she's going back and reading some of his other work and things, and it's like we could have had voiceover, we could have known a little bit more about him and his character. Love again that it was centered on this girl, but and I do understand we're kind of from the perspective of her character, of her not knowing who this guy is and learning about him slowly through the film. Through flashbacks, we see his conversations with his publisher and with other people. We learned a little bit about him, but he's still kind of an enigma even at the end. And that was part of what I felt like maybe some of it was just left to the individual viewer in Kerala watching this could project onto him what maybe he wanted this activist to be speaking about in his nonfiction and fiction books. I don't know. Harsha, did you have a chance to watch this film, or is this?
I didn't. Yeah. This was one of the films that I didn't get to. In my 2-week cram session.
It's all good. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but I think I get why you love it. And again, I come back to, it's a film I admire but didn't love. So, but I really do admire the message of the film and the people that were involved, because it's not, it is a political thing, a political statement in itself to title a film with this title and to have it be about this subject matter. So kudos to the filmmaker and everyone involved for doing a film on this subject.
And doing it a little bit differently. And I think what I was going to recommend as where do you go from here is actually a film that's in completely the opposite direction, which is Pada, a film from this year, which is a story about a group of men played by Kunchako Boban, Joji George, Vinayakan, and Delish Potan, who take the Palakkad collector hostage in order to bargain with the government to get them to repeal the controversial Adivasi Land Amendment Bill. And this is a film based on a true story, and all of these characters are based on actual characters, but it's very much a male-driven political activist film that I think we would recognize a little more. But I put those together as kind of the opposite ends of activist spectrums.
Mm-hmm.
Katherine, in terms of introversion, is the Yakshi film one of the ones that you would recommend? I'm blanking on the name. The Fahad Fazil one.
Yeah, and I had trouble with that film, and it's kind of funny because it is a more introspective. Now that we think about it, it is a very more introspective look at the Yakshi, and it's a very much in your head kind of film.
But you wouldn't compare them?
No,
Okay.
I wouldn't. No.
Look forward to part 2, where we will discuss 2 of Mammootty's biggest films of this year, Puzhu and Bheeshma Parvam. And then in part 3, we talk about several films. So those would be 2 more videos to come with Harsha and Katherine.